I'm Jennifer Brubaker, and I am ironically, which not so much because the planners are so fantastic, I am following up talking about moms, okay? And in a different way. So a few years ago, and I'm sure some of y'all can relate, let me just move this a little bit. I'm sure some of y'all looking around the audience can relate a little bit. A few years ago, I looked kind of in the mirror, figuratively, and I just had this realization one day that I'm like, is this it? Like, this is it? Like, okay, am I at the peak? Like, this is as good as it's gonna get. I'm happy. I have a nice house. I have an amazing family. My kids are teenagers. They're thriving. I have a great marriage. I have a great job. I guess this is it. We just, at that point, I think I was about 46, and I'm like, well, I plan to live to be 100, and so I'm like, do I just coast for the next 54 years? Is this just what it's going to be? And that realization it's a bit hard to kind of handle, especially when you are 46 and in the throes of perimenopause and hormones and your children's hormones and, trying to kind of figure that all out. I felt like I had reached my growth expiration date, I guess. And so all I could see was kind of a downhill from that point. And I realized that at some point I had lost who I was. I had lost myself. And I had spent the previous, at that point about 16 years taking care, and probably more than that if I count in the married years prior, taking care of everybody else and taking care of parents and husband and 3 children. And I didn't even know who I was anymore at that point. And so at that moment, I was, of course, spiraling into being a hot mess. And I'm like, is this a crisis? Like, is this the midlife crisis? But that moment for me, it wasn't a crisis. For me, it became a catalyst, and it sparked a process that has now evolved over the last 3 years of what I am now calling Matrenaissance. And Matrenaissance is a movement that is to help other women at that same point realize that they're not having a crisis either, that it's actually just the beginning. It's actually a maternal renaissance because we have devoted so many years to getting to the point that our children are now not needing us nearly as much as they were in the past, and we are not the same person who we were 14 or 16 or 18 years ago, but we need to rediscover who that woman is, and we can't just expect to go back to the woman that she was prior. And so this Renaissance type movement is the idea of redefining midlife and redefining it, kind of rebranding the midlife crisis as a personal and cultural rebirth. And as IMC professionals, we understand that a powerful brand doesn't just sell a product. It redefines the perception of something. And so today, that's what I want to talk about a little bit, is how we can use IMC more than just promoting a product or a service or even a person, but to use it in a way to launch a movement and to kind of rebrand that midlife crisis in the process of doing so. Because that kind of hot mess moment that I had there, it was a bit of invisible unraveling, but it was also invisible growth sparking this transformation. And the interesting thing that I have learned over the last 3 years is that it's not just me. like everything else that women and mothers do, that is the invisible labor and the invisible mental load of being a mom and being a woman, because it's not necessarily even related to having children, I've also come to find. But that invisible load that we carry, it's also an invisible crisis that we're feeling. And the more that I start to talk about it and the more that I start to talk to others, I found that it's a universal thing. It's just yet another thing that women are kind of carrying inside without expressing to everyone else because we have too many other things to be doing. And so that's when I realized that by sharing something, it starts to become more social. It starts to become more understood. And it's almost that spiral of silence kind of thing, like, oh, wait, it's not just me. I'm not just crazy. I mean, they used to send women off when they would get to this point, because they were crazy. No, they weren't crazy. They were just dealing with a lot of different things. And so the more you talk about it, the more it's like, oh yeah, wait a minute. No, that's me too. That's me. I understand. I know what you're talking about. And so that's when I kind of realized that I needed to figure out something more for all of this. So this Matrenaissance is the beginning of building this movement of a brand that is emotionally honest and yet strategically sound, because I am a scholar before I was any of these other things. I am a scholar, and it's also very culturally needed. So for me, branding of movement, yes, is totally an abstract concept, but I've started to be living it. And so it didn't really start as like a business plan, so to speak, and it didn't even start as a movement. It actually kind of started as a journal and a journal entry, essentially, that I decided that I was going to start a podcast. And so I bought a microphone and I had my laptop and I did it for, 3 months. I had like 12 episodes, I think, before I told a single person that I had done this. And so I would always be amazed when I'd look at my numbers and I'm like, how does anybody even know this exists? Granted, there aren't a lot of listeners, but I'm like, how did anyone literally even come across this? How do I have anybody? And one of the first listeners who still listens to this day, at least I see, unless they've found another person in that random city in Germany, is there is some woman in Germany who she is a loyal listener. And I may have to go to that random place in Germany to find her at some point in time, because it was kind of like, wow, look at that. There's a woman in Germany who knows what I'm talking about. And so for me, it became that. Now, obviously, the branding of that podcast is a bit more of a struggle for me, or it's been a little bit of a struggle for me, simply because, and that's a whole other presentation, because essentially branding a podcast is branding the podcaster. And when you do something as a process of self-development, which is what this has been, and if I listen to those early episodes and I'm like, wow, that's like a different person talking than is right now. I have completely changed as a person from those early episodes. And so when you are trying to figure out who you are, it's hard to brand who you are when you don't know who you are at that point. And so that, I think, has been an evolution. But at this point, I have over 200 episodes and I have listeners in nearly 60 countries. The last time I looked, I think it was 58 maybe. And the 58th country went on. I had to ask my son where this was. I'm like, what country is this? I don't even know what country this is, some random country. So 58 different countries, which shows to me, and it's not anymore just the one person in Germany. It's like people in these countries. I found the last week it was charting in France. That's really cool, and in Australia and in Canada and in the US. And so really, really fascinating thing to me about this brand and this movement is the idea that it's not just me, and it's not just American women, and it's not, it's not any group of women in particular. It's a worldwide thing. And so what started out as storytelling has grown into like a brand ecosystem now. And so if we agree that movement needs more than just a passion, which clearly it does, it needs more to become an actual movement. Looking at it through an IMC blueprint kind of gives us a framework to do it, a toolkit to build something. And so I have because a podcast, it's not a movement. And so I have looked at different principles of IMC along the process for how I would grow this. And first of all is the idea of audience segmentation. I have to know who I'm talking to. And the primary segment for me is midlife women. Midlife women between the ages of 35 and 60, typically, especially those who are mothers of teenagers, and they are experiencing an identity disruption. So I have a whole model that I've developed combining intrapersonal and interpersonal communication into this look at how this process works. But it always starts with a catalyst. It starts with some type of disruption. Maybe it's your oldest going to college, and maybe it's a divorce. Maybe it's, losing a job, or maybe it's realizing unhappiness in a job. It's something that starts as a disruption. And these women have feelings of invisibility, emotional burnout. They're longing for a personal rediscovery beyond the frame of motherhood. They're interested in self-help, self-development, and wellness, empowerment, but they don't want that toxic positivity. They don't want the fluff of it. They crave authenticity. They crave depth and a permission to change and to see that change is possible for them. And so it's important with IMC because it realizes segmentation isn't just demographics. It's those psychographics as well, that emotional positioning, that women don't just want content, they want to feel seen. They want to feel understood. They want to feel that you're being spoken to with a degree of empathy, that it's not just you who's feeling this. You're not alone in this. And so my messaging I try to make tailored to meet them in these complex emotions and complex needs, to show them that, we can be competent even if we are exhausted. We can be smart even if we don't know the answers and we're searching for something. And we can also feel grateful for what we have even if we feel unfulfilled in what we have. And then the second one is the message consistency. Trying to keep my story clean and powerful, but there's always the core message that this is not a midlife crisis. It's not a midlife crisis. It's your Matrenaissance. It's your rebirth. It's your rebrand. And you're not crazy. You are just evolving. And that midlife isn't the end. It's just the beginning. You're just coming to it wiser and with more experience. I also have to keep the tone and the voice complete. Keep it compassionate, but confident, which is hard a lot of the times when you don't necessarily feel confident in yourself and what you're doing. But it also has to be real, that some days when I don't feel it, it's good to share that you don't feel it, to show that, you're not the only one who's feeling it, but you don't want to be that all the time, because then they're like, well, I can't listen to you because you're a mess. So it's finding that balance and finding that clear messaging that builds trust and it builds memorability. And application of this helps to build that brand. The fourth one is being across a multi-platform presence to meet women where they are. And so the podcast, trying to use Instagram, trying to use Facebook, TikTok. Problem is, I'm not a confident TikToker, so TikTok is a little challenging for me. Building my website, building the blog now that I have, because that I am confident in writing. And then also building my credibility as a speaker, as a scholar, and trying to balance those two things to show that there is scholarship behind this, that it's not just I'm out here talking about woo-woo stuff. Yes, I am talking about woo-woo stuff. That is half of me. That's my Moldavite ring half of me, you know? But the other half of me is like a scholar and knowledgeable, and I'm trying to bring that to them. And then the fifth is the brand community, trying to create a sense of belonging, that they are not alone and that they have others. And then the last one is that credibility and collaboration, and just keeping up that degree of credibility. Now, we can learn from previous movements, look at the feminine mystique, which I would go into all of these movements and what we learn from each of them, but I'm running out of time. But the feminine mystique, looking at the Lean In movement, looking at the Me Too movement, looking at this new wave of menopause awareness, that now that, you know, Jennifer Aniston and Oprah and, you know, Naomi Watts, and now that they've all hit menopause, it's like, oh, wait, this is cool. We can talk about this now. So that there is a new approach to, we're able to talk about menopause, but that's still just like the physical symptoms of menopause. It's not looking at how this impacts our identity as a woman and how this impacts our self-development, and then the interpersonal communication ramifications of this, of how this impacts the roles that we currently play and the relationships with our partners and with our friends and with our coworkers and our children and others. You know, how do we have to then renegotiate those relationships and then bring that back into our identity? And so this process is obviously in flux and working, but it's a slow one, but it's something that is super important to talk about. And if we apply IMC concepts, we can really understand how to launch it. Thank you.